Subcommittee 3, Health, Welfare, and Institutions to order. We're going to take Senator Hanger first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I have Senate Bill 1239 in front of you today, child care exemption. Mr. Chairman, this legislation was developed in response to a study that we commissioned last year dealing with exemptions. It seems to be a continuing issue related to who can be exempt and not. And the goal, of course, is to better ensure the safety of children, so it would be a useful tool to provide information to parents so they know what programs are overseen by the state and what programs are exempt. A lot of stakeholders were involved with this over this past year, the study and then the legislation that has taken place, and a lot of negotiations, if you will, Mr. Chairman, in terms of bringing us to this point. So as it was developed in the Senate and as it comes to you today, no one that is currently exempt is losing that exemption. But there are a number of steps that have been taken to provide information to Department of Social Services so that we know who is operating out there. So your typical ones that would remain exempt: child day programs, religious exempts, come and goes, day-and-a-half day camps, YMCA and gym drop-offs, private schools, rec department programs run by local governments and public schools. But all the exempts under this legislation would comply with basic safety and health protocol. And then there would be basically filing a proof of exemption with the commissioner. And I expect this committee is very knowledgeable about this, and there are quite a number of people here in support of this legislation. Mr. Chairman, I know your time is valuable, so I guess we can cut to the chase and address questions or any talking points or have people speak to it.
Mr. Chairman, questions?
Yeah, Emmett, my only heartburn as this is going forward isn't with this isolated, but with the fact that with fingerprint background check requirement, the federal government has determined that even if you're exempt but you're registered, then all your providers, even volunteers, have to comply with the fingerprint background requirement. And therein, to me, comes the rub, in particular when I look at Parks and Rec, where frequently they're going to operate in a summer program with some high school kids, getting minimal pay, if any pay, and running sports teams and things of that nature. And I think that's kind of an unintended consequence.
Right.
Would you find it unpalatable if we were to take the language on lines 161 through 166, which I believe that is basically the Parks and Rec and also school run programs? And if I'm picking the wrong section here, please let me know. That's the program of recreational activities offered by local governments, staffed by local government employees, and so forth. I believe that's the Parks and Rec, but also the summer school activity programs. And if we were to add that back, wherever appropriate, in the 63 to 1715, to where they're truly exempt, that they are not a child day program and shall not be required to be licensed or registered. That basically leaving them in a status quo posture.
Mr. Chairman, if in fact I accepted the premise of Delegate Roth's concern, that may be appropriate, but I believe, at least the information that I provided, that this filing proof of exemption, as they would be required under this bill, does not trigger them coming under the federal law. And that's, could I ask staff on that to provide some clarification? Staff, do you have
their DSS here? Because that was the whole issue with the religious exempt folks who were previously under this exempt.
So we look at this, Mr. Chair, would you like to do the DSS, or would you walk through the requirements?
Well, DSS is who's told me. Are they hiding? Hi, Margaret. How are you?
Hi.
Margaret, how is this any different from what religious folks are going to have to do?
So, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Orr, Mr. Chairman,
and Sarah's gonna help me here, but we believe that filing the exemption is not equivalent to registration. You're filing that you are exempt, but it's not registration.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if I may. And I'm gonna put you on the spot, because the past 3 years, I have asked, is there any way to thread the needle so that our religious exempt entities were not registered?
So,
And as you recall, I had a bill in last year, 2 years ago, where we played the semantics game. And I was told unequivocally from the department, we can play the thesaurus game all we want, but if they notify y'all under the feds, if you know about them, they're gonna have to get fingerprint background checks.
Mr. Chairman,
What, is my memory flawed, or, which it can be, so.
I do not believe so, because the religious exempt facilities are regulated by the section of the code 63.217, 16, 1716. So that is where the requirement, so they are regulated by that section of the code, and therefore are required to fall under these requirements.
Emmett, this might get more fun than I'd even imagined.
Well,
before we come to run.
let me, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Orrock and I've worked on issues of this nature for quite some time, and where I'm at this evening, I believe that to be correct, and I've talked to staff, and I believe we're okay with this, but I'm not opposed to, if Delegate Orrock is interested in doing something of that sort, sorting it out in conference after we've had time to review it thoroughly and get comfort. And I had some other language to suggest.
Because I don't have heartburn with the underlying premise.
Right,
I'm
right.
sorry, Mr. Chairman. But if what I've heard Margaret say is correct, I'm gonna tell you what my intention is. If Parks and Rec doesn't have to do the background check, then my intention would be that we need to amend it to put the religious exempt in that box too. Because any of these entities that take the federal money have to play by the federal rules.
Right.
But to me, we're drawing the line in two different places here. If we're saying religious has to get registered, but Parks and Rec, no, you just tell us you're there, that's not registered. That's a distinction without a difference. But if the feds say there's a difference, okay. Because my understanding of this thing for the whole past 3 years was we just wanted to know the religious facilities were out there. And, you know, and whatever we need to do, so we can get it in conference, would be my suggestion at this juncture. Because I don't want to torpedo your bill, that's never been my intention, nor will it be.
And it had been expressed to me that the local governments, Parks and Recs, wanted to be clear that they were reviewing their program for safety and compliance, and that there would be no inspections unless there was a report, you know. And I'm willing to do that in an enactment clause or something to clarify that.
But the whole sticking point to me gets around this whole federal.
Right. Well, and I think.
And I've heard two different sides of that same coin.
Right. And, Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to sort that out in conference and get that right if that's what it takes. We do have, I think, a lot of people here this evening that are very strongly supportive because they've had personal experiences in their lives that are necessitating this move here. And I feel the basic legislation that you have in front of you is something that everybody's worked on and built a coalition around that will provide for the safety of the children, no matter where they are, whether they're in an exempted religious program, which is protecting that religious exemption, or whether they're in a locally government rec program. A basic minimum safety standards are what we want to make sure are there and in place. And there are obviously tangential to that, if you're taking federal dollars, then there are background checks that are required.
That's regardless.
Right, right. But, and it's my understanding that even some of the religious exempts take federal money, some of them. Right.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so we've got things in the proper posture. That's never been the issue, Emmett, as you recall, when we were on conference 2 years ago. If they took federal money, they had to play by the federal rules. That was never a question. But the bill we passed this year, Senator Wexton had the Senate counterpart, though, that's forcing religious entities, anyone that's registered, whether they're taking a penny of federal money or not, was gonna have to have the fingerprint background check. So that we can move the process forward, recognizing to you, it's gonna be a poison pill that you'll reject and we'll get it in conference. And I wanna work with you, and if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask the speaker to be a cop free. I am gonna propose that, Mr. Chairman, we act on the amendment I proposed, that would take the language of lines 161 through 166 and insert that in the section 63.2, 1715, where they're truly exempt from licensure, the Part A.
Second. Moved and seconded to accept the amend the bill without objection.
Mr. Chairman,
Doug Gary.
so a further question. So we've spent 2-3 years ago, we spent a lot of time sort of looking on all the various different categories of, and I tried to get my own cheat sheet here, center-based versus family-based, and licensed versus registered, unlicensed. One of the questions I had earlier is it struck me that we have new requirements of certain daycare centers versus vis-a-vis others. Is that correct, or are we now is there gonna be one standard for safety and educational programmatic elements and sort of the 1 through 9 on the summary sheet? The background checks, the reports to the commissioner, is that gonna be the same center hanger for all of these various different child day centers, short-term child day centers, religious exempt, certified preschools and school age, family day homes, volunteer registered family day homes, private versus public schools? Are they all now gonna have the same requirements of reporting and so forth and so on? Or are we making it even a little bit more complex with certain of these providers?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, we are making it less complex, but clearly we will have those categories that will be registered, be required to be registered, and have appropriate oversight. There will be clearly those, and we're preserving all those that historically have been exempt, that will remain exempt with some exceptions. They have to not register, they don't have to be registered, they just have to file a verification that they exist and that they're exempt. They have to have a trained person certified in first aid and part of the resuscitation, president of child daycare programs. They have to maintain daily attendance records, have emergency preparedness plan in place, and comply with laws that are in place for regulation and governing transportation of children. They do not have to jump through all the hoops. It's just basic safety standards. All these exempts that I was referring to earlier that have historically the government run, the stop and goes, whatever you call them, I've got my list here. The come and goes, day and a half camps, YMCA, gym drop-offs, all of those remain exempt. The issue here was dealing, and have agreed, actually, we worked closely with the religious exempts, and they all, when we were in the Senate in front of the committee, our good buddies, Eddie and Dan, stepped forward and said, yes, we support this. And then there was, between the Senate and over here, some concern from the local rec departments, local governments, that there was not clarity that they would not be inspected by the Department of Social Services unless something went wrong. You know, there was a report, the child was injured or a child died, that would trigger an inspection by the Department of Social Services. So that was the one issue that had been expressed. And actually, you know, I think we can work this out in conference with Delegate Orrock, but it would be a bit of overkill and destructive to the overall clearness of what we're trying to accomplish if we were to just pull religious and government-owned out, and they wouldn't have this same level of comfort, if you will, for the safety of the children that the other programs would have.
Doug Gary.
So, and I'm not asking a rhetorical question, I truly don't know. Do all child care day providers or centers that hire providers today, do they all have at least one person trained in CPR present at the child day center program? I'm seeing a nod, yes, okay. Do they all maintain daily attendance records? And do they all have an emergency preparedness plan?
License, not unlicensed and not licensed.
If
Wait.
they're licensed to do.
Alright,
The issue is
alright.
nothing's required if they're licensed exempt.
Okay, and then how about, that's the maintain daily records or the CPR? Licensed what? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Licensed what? I'm sorry.
That's only required in licensed facilities, not the license exempt.
To maintain daily attendance
Yes,
records?
yes.
License exempt do not have.
No.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, just follow.
Okay.
And how about have an emergency preparedness plan in place?
No.
Licensed programs are required to, but licensed exempt are not.
All right, and then how about comply with all safe sleep practices for infants recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics?
Licensed programs are required to, license exempt or not.
So, Mr. Chairman, fine.
Yeah, I get it.
Is the intent then to try, Senator or the others here, is the intent to try to get all of the currently regulated but unlicensed, all having the same, is that a fair statement, those set of 9 checkbox issues that,
Safety measures.
right?
I think
right.
also men all types of care deserve the
Right.
same safety.
No, I don't disagree, I'm just trying to understand, I just wanna make sure I would love to see us make more clarity, Mr. Chairman, and sort of less
Right.
confusion amongst all these things, because when we first took this on in our committee 3 or 4 years ago, when Delegate Orrick was trying to help me understand it, it took a lot for me to understand the complexities that are already there, so.
And I think, I represent Dan and Eddie, we're tabling Dan, I think, as a comment, and there are a lot of people here that are strongly supportive,
Senator
so.
Hanger, I'm gonna do this, because I know you've got folks here. I'm gonna allow each side 5 minutes.
I'll come back to you, sir.
Okay, I was just gonna add a bit of clarification, just to muddy the water slightly more. We're not solely operating in a universe of licensed and unlicensed. There's licensed, we do have some registered. Our child day programs and family day homes are taken care of in terms of requirements that apply, including background check requirements in different ways. So when we're talking about this, it's not just the clear-cut dichotomy between licensed and unlicensed that you also will see come into play in some of these. But these pieces do bring a little bit more consistency across them. So just wanna make sure, we've been through this so many years now, I remind you of the fact that we have both center-based
Sure.
and home-based and those types of organizations in mind as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that's good. As we came here, as we gathered, I think there were sides like for and against. We kind of come to a consensus, but I think now there's some, particularly with the dialogue that we're having, makes it very.
We didn't have a problem until we messed with it.
No, I think as religious exempt as an example, they feel like they've come along and agreed to certain things because of the safety of the children, they want to interest in that, but that they don't want to be pushed into doing things, necessarily.
Well, let's hear from some interested parties, and we'll give 5 minutes to each side.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. My name is Betsy Cummings, I'm from Republic, Virginia. I'm a veteran of the United States Navy. My son, Dylan Cummings, was 7 weeks old when he passed away at his religious exempt child care facility. When I toured that place, they were telling me about the 4-to-1 ratios and all kinds of requirements that they had to follow, so I assumed they're in a building, not in a home, they must be licensed, what else could they be? I've never heard of religious exempt before. Then after my son passed away, the following morning, Child Protective Services came to my home after they watched my son's autopsy and explained to me that they were religiously exempt. Still didn't understand what that meant. I do a lot of research, and I was appalled at what I learned, that they don't have to follow, a licensed facility has to lay their child, an infant, on their back unless they have a doctor's note saying otherwise. But a religious exempt facility does not have to. If they had to follow that same standard, my son would still be here. After he passed away, there was an investigation done by licensing, so for Division of Social Services, the Homicide Department, and Alfred Police Department, the Fire Marshal. The room that they were in was labeled a electrical storeroom. There was no egress, 1 door in, 1 door out. They had 24 children under the age of 2.5 in attendance that day. The fire marshal only allowed them to have 9 in that age group. My son, because he was laid on his stomach, he was unaccustomed to that. He didn't have the neck muscles to hold his head up. He surely couldn't roll over. He was only 7 weeks old. And the mattress that he was on was 2 foam pads that had a divot in it. So even had he been a little older, he still would have not survived this. The ratios are 4-to-1. So There were 10 infants in the room that day. There were 2 childcare providers for the infant room. One left at like 11:45 to go to a doctor's appointment, leaving 1 provider for 10 infants. And the room that they were in was an electrical store room, so all of the electrical working for that building was in that room. So had this gone a different way and that caught fire, all of those kids would have died, not just my son. The one person that was supposed to be watching the 10 infants, she was 53 feet away from the room, on the other side of the building, eating her lunch and socializing. She claims she scanned the room to check on the infants in that manner, but she didn't actually go check on each child. My son's case, it did go to court. Eventually a judge did dismiss felony charges against the owner and the staff, but he did say, and I quote, "While the court is certainly sympathetic, the remedy for the situation lies in the sound discretion of the General Assembly, not with the judiciary." For me, this is not a warm religion. This is my calling from God to strengthen child care regulations for my son, for other children, because I don't ever want another parent to feel the pain that I feel every single day. Because certain very small but very important basic child care safety measures were not in place for my son. The system failed him, and I want to rectify that.
Thank you very much. 2 minutes.
Alright, my name's Ellie Lafkin, you guys probably know me, I know all of you. I know personally, Delegate Bell, that you have received several emails of support in regards to this bill. I grew up as your constituent, I have family and friends, colleagues still as your constituents, so we've all written in. We, of course, are in support of this bill. My daughter Camden passed away in an unlicensed daycare as well. She passed away in 2012. As Betsy mentioned, the regulations are all over the board for licensed, unlicensed, religious exempt, or I guess license exempt, et cetera. We're just trying to even these out, make it so that parents are not confused, and it's, open and shut. When you see a daycare, you know what to expect. And Senator Hanger's bill does address this. This for some reason has become a religious issue, and I'm not really sure why it's a religious issue. My daughter does attend, she attends Building Blocks Daycare, which is in Mount Olive Church in McGaheysville, Virginia. It's a wonderful program. They have not failed an inspection in 4 years. They choose to be licensed. So I appreciate that I am able to take my child to a religious, Bible-based daycare, and know that the minimum safety and health standards are in place. And I think every parent deserves to know that.
All right, thank you. Anyone on the other side of this issue?
Dan Zacharias, Director of ODAX, appreciate the opportunity to address the committee. We are supporting Emmett Hanger's bill. We've been a stakeholder at the table. It's been a long, arduous process with very intense negotiations, and we do appreciate the attention that his office has given us. All along, we've had things that have serious concern, but we reached a point of agreement. I am asking for some minor amendments on ratios for older kids that would make more sense with our academic settings, where they have before and after school care that has to be operated under the religious exemption. And we could have some unintended consequences, some simple amendments, and also to the definition of serious physical injury. Just a minor tweak there to make it really apply to serious injuries and not sweep in a lot of unnecessary minor injuries. My heart certainly goes out to the ladies here who've lost children. The ratios, in the case where the ratios were being violated, you can't make a case that proves that the current ratios are unsafe. We feel like the ratios we are already under are very safe. Secondly, the bill, there's a list of 14 exemptions in code currently. This bill whittles that list down to 6. Of the 6, 2, number 1 and number 5, have their own separate code sections, 1716 and 1717. So to get to the delegate's question, no, there's not going to be equal treatment across the board. There's still going to be very different treatment. And the religious exempts already are
very much regulated. And with their own code section that's longer than the exemption code section itself. And so, and then what's being done with 2, 3, 4, and 6, I'm not advocating for piling more requirements on them, but it falls way short of the requirements that are being made of us. And we're having new requirements added that we've done our best to agree to. So I want to make that clear so you understand that's our perspective of the answer to that question. We never hear the incidents of children who died in licensed centers, and there have been those. There have been dozens of children who have died in unlicensed state homes. And this bill does not address unlicensed state homes, nor did the fingerprint bill. I think that's important to bear in mind. We're not really getting at the heart of the problem. So, having said that, we're happy to support the bill with our requested amendments, but I think those points need to be made. And then regarding the religious exemption, for those who don't know the history, that goes back to 1979, and it is a philosophical argument. The danger of licensure, ultimately, of a church ministry, and that the potential that it could then bleed from safety issues into issues of conscience as well. And that's why we're always adamant to try to protect the religious exemption, while at the same time advocating basic safety standards. Thank you.
Thank you. We have about a minute and a half on that side of the discussion, if there's anyone else that wants to speak to it. Do we? Yes.
The Virginia Child Care Association, with the private for-profit providers of child care, we support the bill.
Is there, the amendments, Mr. Zacharias?
Yes, sir.
Are those?
I handed them to staff.
Been distributed.
They have. The committee's seen the amendments?
It's on the second page of the document that was distributed.
This is a rather lengthy document.
Has the patron seen these?
Have you seen these?
Dan mentioned. The only concern I would have on ratios is I'm not sure if we would, there was a study that made recommendations, and then if these go back against what currently is in regulation or statute, then obviously wouldn't be able to agree to it, but I don't know that for a fact. But we could consider them in conference, so you didn't adopt them, or that may be the way to go, make sure what, Dan, you okay with this doing it?
I would be fine with that, Senator. Yes, if you want to take those suggestions to conference, that'd be fine.
We can do that.
I appreciate that.
Okay. And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, there was a lot of interest in this. I don't know how many of these people are here to speak to this bill, but at least maybe recognize their hand or stand or
Sure,
whatever, if you
yeah,
have more
if
time.
you're
I know you
supporting the
have.
bill, just please raise your hand. Okay, thank you.
So I will, Ms. Grace, I think this does have a fiscal impact, so we probably need to, proper motion to the report and refer to that.
I have Senator Haines' dreaded letter. that
Do you? Okay, all right.
requested upstairs.
We can, I'm sure that we can do that. Yeah, in fact, I don't think it does this, it would in the out years, if it leads to more staffing requirements at Department of Social Services. One thing I would make clear, that one of the things here that is helpful, requirement that a notice, because, all of these entities that are currently exempt would continue to be exempt, but there would be a notice requirement that shows conspicuously that they are not licensed as such, that they are exempt. And that would be the purposes.
So do that.
Some of us mistrust fiscal impact statements, but I'm just reading what was reported. It was 47 positions, which is about $4 million, almost $5 million.
It's to the original bill,
Ah,
if the substitute is not.
Yeah, this has gone through a lot of iterations in the process, and I don't think that you'll have to hire anybody during this final budget week.
Okay. Further questions from the subcommittee?
I just wanted to comment, Mr. Chairman.
Garrett?
I'm truly humbled by your loss, and I'm sure you're backing on it. Can't say for anybody else other than, but I have no doubts these are the men and women up here as well. We cannot begin to understand what you've gone through. I deeply appreciate what you do to try to recognize and acknowledge that your child had truly had a life worth living and never had that chance. So I truly respect that, and I say that quite humbly and sincerely. Thank you for your tribute.
Can I ask one question?
Another round.
Ms. Schultz, so I understand the substitute, does that take out off the fiscal impact just for 18, or?
So there's delayed enactment, Mr. Chairman, there's a delayed enactment to July 1 of next year. The biggest impact on this would be the additional fingerprint or name check backgrounds that we will have to do for this bill. So we would need more folks in our Office of Background Investigation.
So it does have a, I'm just trying to get from here to there. It will have a fiscal impact at some point in the next year or two.
Mr. Chairman, O'Bannon, they are self-funded, they are funded by fees, so they are special funds, but yes.
So, we need to send this up.
Margaret.
Well, we probably ought to send it up just to look at it, and then we can pick it right out.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be negotiating other things, so we'll try to do.
That'll be one of them.
All right,
Okay, so.
I'll move that we report the amended bill and refer to appropriation just for a look and go from there.
Second.
The recommendation.
All right, move the properly seconded to report and refer the bill. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Howe.
All right.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and delegates. I have Senate Bill 880. In 2014, we passed a bill to license genetic counselors, and there was widespread support for the bill because they have to deliver some pretty difficult information to patients quite frequently. And there was a feeling that we don't want just anybody to put out a plaque saying they're a genetic counselor. And as part of that, we found out there was one genetic counselor who was actually a pioneer in the field. She'd been working at that point for 25 years in the field, and she did not have a master's degree. So we put in a grandfather clause in the original bill. Where things ran amok was the Board of Medicine never did the regulations so that, or haven't yet finished the regulations, so that she could meet the qualifications, even though she sent in all of her paperwork. So she got herself, or they got her into this catch-22. So all this bill does is extend the date for the grandfather, so that it's after they do the regulations, so that she can be grandfather. Apparently, this is not the first time this has happened. It happened to some surgical assistants and surgical technologists, and that was fixed.
Remember, before the original legislation, all you had to do was put a sign out that you were a genetic counselor. We could have been genetic counselor.
Wow.
Question for the patient.
So, Senator Howell, I carried that legislation with the surgical assistants, and it was the
Oh,
exact
okay,
same process. We originally envisioned, because the administration said it's gonna take us 2 years to do these regulations, which seemed to me somewhat absurd, but they gave them 2 years. Some of the hospital systems had some turnover in my own hospital system, and they just simply forgot to send it in by a certain date. but the legislation that we passed about 2 years ago, instead of extending it a year and a half, extended it from that July to December with the understanding, I was trying to figure out why in the Senate y'all changed it from 17 to 18.
Just because we were just trying to make sure that if they continued not to have them ready, I didn't have to come back again next year. So it's just,
Senator, are there others that could potentially, though, sort of inadvertently, or is this just the only person in Virginia this is
as
gonna
far as
affect?
anybody knows, this is one.
Oh, really?
Nobody else has come forward and put in the paperwork.
No, it's Gary.
I have no doubt, Senator Howell, if you went to the administration and said, this, by God, will be done, they would do it. So would it help you and help your,
I wish I were that confident in powers, but.
would it help, Ms. Jones, would it help you or your client, constituent to say it's 17? By God, y'all gonna do it by December at the end of this year.
Move to report.
I guess that answers. I was trying to help. I was trying to get her to swing a big bat up
Looks
there.
like you did.
I guess I did.
Okay, we have
Thank
a
you, Mr.
motion properly seconded to report. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Senator.
This is great, thank you.
Senator Peterson.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying this discussion, Mr. Chair. This bill is Senate Bill 922, and my knowledge of it could probably fit in a shot glass, but thank God I've got David Brown here to walk us through it. And so, David, you
Sure.
would mind kind of stuff.
I'm David Brown, I'm the Director of Department of Health Professions, which incidentally has the Board of Medicine in it. I'm glad you didn't ask me any questions last time. But this is just a technical cleanup bill. It doesn't give any of our boards any additional authority. But on the recommendation of the Attorney General's office, in places where currently the code says licensure, which we've been interpreting to mean licensure or certification or registration or permitting, that we need to go ahead and spell out that we need certification, permitting, registration.
Mr. Chairman, it makes perfect sense, but I guess my question, isn't it gonna involve a lot more than just this department?
Well, this involves, the code sections we're doing involves two agencies, because it's on.
But I guess there are a whole lot of other agencies that issue other permits. So, I'm not, I move to report.
Sarah, it's just drawn to
It
D4.
will only apply to D4 and
And so this, this doesn't change anybody's scope of practice. It just sort of makes it clear that permitting is included.
It means when there's an exclusion from the Freedom of Information Act for an application, it's not only application for licensure, but also application
Exactly.
for permits.
And Mr. Chairman, I knew this only applied to D4. I guess my question was more to the point, I think the AG's opinion applies a lot broader than what this legislation, and this is just the first of many we may be seeing.
Somebody else's bill.
After
That's
result.
right, get your own bill.
I have a motion to report the bill. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Prevost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am here to discuss Senate Bill 1149, extending review services. As you know, VIEW is the Virginia Initiative for Employment and Welfare. This bill is very narrowly focused on recent candidate graduates who are in the VIEW program and are participating in a certificate program or a 2-year degree. This bill would allow child care services and case management services to extend for the full 24 months rather than just the 12 months, which is current law. And this is a bill that came out of Commission on Youth unanimously. And also we had a subcommittee to look at TANF services, how TANF dollars are spent with the sole purpose of ensuring that individuals become self-sufficient. I did did chair that TANF subcommittee. Most of the money for this is paid for out of the TANF dollars. And there's a little bit of non-TANF money, it's $24,000, but I have been advised by the department that there's enough money, there's been underspending in the VIEW program, they'll be able to take the $24,000 out of the current VIEW program. So, no general fund impact, and I just wanna say it is so important that individuals get their 2-year degree or certificate because of the 61% of the folks in the VIEW program, they're working, but they're making $8.86 an hour. And our studies have shown that to get the big bump in income, you really do need to have some type of skill or a certificate. And we want our families to be self-sufficient. We don't want them coming back.
Questions for the page?
Mr. Chairman, well, Garrett had 2 questions.
Yes.
So there isn't, Senator, there's not any requirement that they actually, other than just simply enrolled in some sort of institution or higher ed or in a program, there's not any, you mentioned, I absolutely get it, and you and I sat on this committee meetings and heard, and I agree with that, that once they get their degree, that significantly improves their outlook. But simply attending school, do you have any data that shows that simply attending school has that kind of remunerative sort of future history of learning?
We had data that said when they're in school, they stay in school, so they tend to get the, they stay there. I have Bureau of Labor data from the federal government that shows 2-year degrees are far more, how should I say it? I guess they're more marketable and also yield a higher wage salary.
I guess I was more concerned that the language in your bill basically says as long as they're enrolled in a program, but it really doesn't say any sort of outcomes. They not have to finish that in 2 or 5 years or something like that. They simply have to be in it.
Mr. Chairman, the very last line, 62 and 63, I'm Amy Atkinson with the Commission on Youth. The department will, if this bill goes forward, they will develop the regulations for this. So some of the outcomes, some of the things that you're bringing up, we would hope that those would be in the regulations. You can't just go to school, go to school, go to school. The idea is we want the TANF recipients to be successful, and the way to be successful is to get the degree and to move forward.
And Mr. Chairman, I mean nothing disrespectful, but hoping that they'll do it and having some sort of expectation, Amy, may or may not necessarily be the same to everybody.
Yes, sir.
Follow-up question?
Go ahead, Gary.
So we spent a lot of time upstairs dealing with.
Great member of the committee.
We spent a lot of time upstairs dealing with TANF and how we spend it. And we now, with, at least in the House budget, I don't know what's in the Senate budget, but we now spend down to about a $55 million balance. We're down to 40 now? Well, we're out of balance. Each year is about $31 million out of balance, which means before we could even come back at the end of this biennium, we would no longer have a balance in TANF that would go towards us. Because with the mandated services and all the discretionary activities that are already being spent, and what the governor proposed, and what, at least in our House budget, we're down to 40 million.
Put 10 million in there. Yes. Community welfare.
And then the 4.8 million back. So that's my only concern, and it is, and we talked about this upstairs, whether in fact it's a sustainable process, and in 2 years' time, we would now be not just spending those free federal dollars, or however you want to think about it, but now be required to allocate general funding to make up the difference, or we're gonna be cutting discretionary services,
Well, Mr.
healthy
Chairman.
families, community action, domestic violence, EITC, comprehensive health, boys and girls clubs, reset, et cetera.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comment. I mean, the programs you mentioned, what we would call categories 3 and 4, where they're not directly targeted to TANF benefits. TANF recipients may participate in them, but they're not category 1 or 2 programs. We have about $20 million that are going out to categories 3 and 4, which don't have a direct impact on TANF benefits, on TANF recipients, and don't really contribute to enabling TANF recipients to maintain their So I guess I would argue with that, maybe we should do some reshuffling. I mean, depending, because remember, the intent of the TANF program is to really help TANF families become self-sufficient, and I'm not putting blame, I'm just saying the way sausage is made sometimes, we manage to spend the dollars on programs that are not directly related to mission.
So I really, you're passionate advocate for this, and you know your stuff. Mission Youth has done a whole lot of work on this. And my challenge, my problem is that Delegate Murphy actually had a bill that would have used $10 to get folks into community colleges, and that did not advance. And in fact, Delegate Garrett is right. We're actually spending more in taxes than we're taking in now, because the block rate hasn't changed. The same she'll shaking her head up and down. Our problem is if we do this and other worthy things, down the road in a year or two, we're going to be looking at kicking people off of services. And I just need to make that, as we discussed this before.
Yeah, no, and that's valid, and I do understand that. I guess I mentioned I would look at the categories 3
You
and
might well
3.
disagree.
But right, I mean, it's a healthy discussion to have.
Yes.
Amy, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Two lines that you cited at the end of the bill, is it, can we expect that in part of those regulations would be some performance standard? For example, after 12 months,
We
mean-
have an administrative, absolutely. Is Skip here? Okay, I think he might be. He's trying to hide behind.
He's trying to hide behind. Just reading real quick.
And that's where, when we were drafting the legislation, putting it forward, we wanted to give flexibility to the program, have the department come up with, because Delegate Garrett, what you said is true. You don't want, just going to school, and going to school does not help. The idea is you want them to get a degree so they can get a job that'll help them become self-sufficient. And that's what we would hope, and that's what we would hope that the regulations would do.
I'm sorry, member of the department, yes, we can develop regulations that have some outcome measures in it.
So let me, ma'am,
sure.
Tom, sit down on the front row.
Must I?
No, sir, you don't have to. So, and I think Delegate James is well aware of this. The House put $10 million into this community thing, which has very good specific metrics in it. And so, with all due respect, whatever happens today, I think coming forward with this, it might make it stronger if you did the cart after the horse and came up with those metrics when you bring it. I honestly think that might be helpful.
Well, we can, by metrics, we can work on.
Right. Some
A better
measure, how many students, so what was accomplished?
Okay.
Yes, and I think this is a great bill, because it's sort of what I do in my day job, and we see a lot of people who, with just a little bit of help in wraparound services, that will create a clear pathway for them and their families to move away from. So I think the ultimate metrics would be that you have fewer people needing this, and they're moving on. And I think that if you want to look at the value, there's a lot of documentation that address the fact that how much is a community college degree, how much is a certification worth, how much is that going to do? But I would say that the metrics are going to be pretty cheap, and then I think it's not going to be that much of a low bar, because a lot of people do. A lot of times, what the governor in our community talks about the value of these certifications, but a lot of the people that are coming that you're addressing need to have some wraparound skills before they enter into it. But once they get those, I think the retention rate would be extremely high. So.
We can certainly, we can certainly pull that together. How quickly could we pull it together? In time for the full committee, or if you were to pass this along with a conditional support?
I want to thank you very much. But I honestly, and we'll talk about this upstairs with Lieutenant Freeman, but I'm going to move gently. Okay.
I'll be back.
And I would second that for all the reasons that I said. I'm sorry.
And I see the advocate stand.
Good after, or good evening, rather, Mr. Chairman.
I would send my second.
I'm Virginia Hurt from the Virginia Poverty Law Center. We are certainly in favor of this. We do have some of that information as it relates graduates of occupational and technical degree programs and certificate programs in Virginia at these community colleges make on average about $35,700 within 1 year after graduation, and that is a study that's been done by College Measures on the American Institute for Research. Additionally, those folks who are now making those funds would no longer be in the TANF program, and so that would also provide, I guess, some of that leeway as far as those funds becoming available, where those folks are no longer having to be on the program, which would provide some availability for those additional funds that may end up stemming the need for any general funding that would come from that. As we've indicated, that there are funds, as Senator has said, based on what has been done and what has not been done with the underspending, what's been utilized, that the rolls have been going down, and so those funds are available and can continue to become available. And as we've indicated, once you have those individuals who are out there making those funds not on TANF, those are individuals putting money back into the general economy of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so certainly I think this bill does serve not only those individuals, and again, this is simply a 24-month thing. They're already getting 12 months. So we're talking an additional 12 months. But it also serves the Commonwealth in general, because once those individuals become self-sufficient, they are then injecting funds back into the general economy of the Commonwealth, and certainly that serves everyone's benefit.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, hi, my name is John Martz. I'm the Director of the New Kent Department of Social Services. I'm also the Chairman of the Virginia League of Social Service Executives TANF Employment Services Committee. And if I could just have a brief moment to explain why we're supporting this bill. The VDSS mission statement starts off with saying people helping people triumph over poverty. I know my agency and just about every agency, one of the first sentences talks about self-sufficiency and how self-sufficiency helps out with every other part of what we do. Now, if you take a look at the number of cases that we have coming through CPS, a lot of them are already our clients. They're already coming in through TANF, they're already coming in through SNAP. By helping people get self-sufficient, we're looking not only to lower the TANF rolls, we could conceivably lower the SNAP rolls, the Medicaid rolls, the CPS referrals that come in. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 11.2% of Virginians currently live below the poverty level. And now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, employed people were more likely to hold active certifications or license than unemployed. Median usual weekly earnings of full-time wage and salary workers with a certification are 34% higher than those without. People who hold certification or license have a lower unemployment rate than those without, 2.7% as opposed to 6.1%. People with a certification or license earn about 1/3 more than those without. We can go on and on and on, and we have statistics to show that if you get a certification or a degree, you're going to earn more. That's the key to self-sufficiency. I'll also submit that our clients coming through the TANF program are trying to do this with a child. Now, how many people in this room who have a college degree or a certification were able to do that in 12 months? Nobody that I know of. Also, how many were able to do it with children? It makes it twice as hard. This is a supportive service. This is getting people self-sufficient, allowing them to take themselves off the rolls so that they do then work full-time and become part of their community.
Mr. Chairman, Emily Griffey with Voices for Virginia's Children. I just want to echo Regina and John's excellent points. We served on the work group that made this recommendation as well, and I really enjoyed that this recommendation came from the folks who worked frontline with TANF participants and can see how much they could benefit. I also think it's an answer to avoiding the cliff effect of losing benefits and then hitting rock bottom, and that it provides that step down for folks who are in an educational program, and I encourage you to support this effort.
Thank you. Subcommittee members, a motion has been made.
I'm just, let me say, I appreciate everybody's advocacy. Challenge is that TANF is at risk of running out of balance. We put $10 million into this thing, so I'm going to gently recommend that we gently table it, but I promise you we'll keep working on it and see what we can do. And
that would be great. I will come back and we'll get you more metrics and maybe a better way of presenting this, and perhaps our TANF rolls will continue to go down. I appreciate your interest and your willingness to continue to work with me, so thank you very much.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to lay the bill gently on the table. That is not debatable. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Two votes. He's on the commission.
Against my chair.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
All right.
Don't upset the chair.
Senator. Senator.
No word about it.
Senator Tate did not choose to join us, so that takes care of everything.
Bye for the day.
So,
Ladies and gentlemen.
unless there's further business from subcommittee members, we
Y'all,
stand adjourned.
The summaries that I put together tomorrow, I'm not going to include the bills that didn't.
nothing that came out, only what comes out.
Got it, got it.
You got Delegate James?
Yes, sir.
If you ain't had enough fun, you're still doing 7th floor, I'm just saying. That's where I'm headed.
Like Disneyland.
Okay, I tell you.
Oh, another side.
Another killing.
Yeah,
You could put some of that in there.